Hey there, greetings everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Plan B Success. We have two people today, both authors, Karin Reed and Joseph Allen. Karin's the CEO of Speaker Dynamics. She's also an Emmy Award-winning broadcast journalist and now is focused on helping business professionals like you and me be more confident communicating. And then Joseph is a professor in industrial and organizational psychology. Somehow they both met and came out with Suddenly Virtual, making remote meetings work. So let's find out about them. So welcome, both of you.
Thanks for having us.
Good to be here.
Absolute pleasure. So why don't we start with you, Karin? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, as mentioned, I am the CEO of Speaker Dynamics, which is a corporate communications training firm. We have global customers. So, this way that we're conversing right now has opened the doors to many more opportunities as well. So I began as a broadcast journalist, started doing a lot of on-camera work in the corporate world after I left TV news. And what I found is that I would be brought in as the professional on-camera spokesperson, but more often they were bringing in people from the corner office or the corner cubicle to appear on camera alongside of me and expect them to perform at the same level of skill. That often didn't work out well. So I recognized a business opportunity to teach business professionals how to be better on-camera communicators. That has since expanded to any platform. So that could be in person, on camera, or through virtual communication tools. But as you can imagine, over the past 2 years, my services have been in much higher demand because video communication has been our special sauce. And suddenly we went from, training the executive leadership team to training the entire enterprise because business had to be done through a webcam. So that is kind of the story of how I got to be where I am and Speaker Dynamics came into being.
How about you, Joseph? Tell us about yourself.
Sure. So I am a professor at the University of Utah, as you mentioned, of industrial and organizational psychology. But I'm best described in terms of my research and in terms of what I do as a meeting scientist. And so what that is someone who studies how meetings work in organizations and provides guidance on how to make them better and how to keep them from being derailed or becoming problematic for the organization. And so I run the Center for Meeting Effectiveness at the University of Utah and work with a variety of clients and contacts trying to change how we meet for the better, including virtually, as we've all been doing in many ways for a couple of years, as well as hybrid as we transition to hopefully less COVID-related issues and more business-related issues as we try to be flexible and collaborate into the future. So that's me in a nutshell. And I've been studying meetings for about a decade and a half, and so, done a lot of work in this space. And so I'm very comfortable talking about all the different types and sizes and shapes of meetings and how they operate and how frankly, we can do better.
Awesome. And how did you both end up meeting and coming out with the book?
This feels like our first date story, Joe. Do you want me to tell it?
You always tell it better. And if I say it, then you're always like, well, actually it was this. And so I'll let you do it. So that way, everybody knows the truth.
Yes. We do finish each other's sentences by now, Rajiv, like literally and figuratively. So we were actually both working as subject matter experts for a mutual client. And they brought us together to do this webinar on what meetings would look like in the future. So this was the first week of March 2020. And we postulated that, 5-10 years out, virtual meetings were going to be much more prominent and video would be at their core. So all of those things that we said would happen in like 5 to 10 years happened in like 3 weeks. Because if you remember what happened in March 2020, things went sideways very quickly. So that is how we began our relationship is through that webinar. But what happened was a couple of months after the pandemic really started taking hold, we kind of got back together, checked in with each other and found out that we were both drinking from the fire hose of people who needed help in navigating these virtual meetings. And we said, is there a way that we can amplify our work and our message? And that's how suddenly virtual came into being. I had written a previous book through Wiley, On Camera Coach, and I approached them about the idea of working with Joe as a co-author, and they were really excited about it. Fast-tracked the book, and we were able to get that out pretty quickly.
That's pretty awesome. So, in your book, you talk about virtual decompress, right? Can you tell us what exactly does that mean?
Yeah, so virtual decompress, I think you're talking about something that's up in our second book, which just came out just a few weeks ago, Suddenly Hybrid, where in our first book, we talked a lot about how important it is to have the camera on because of the nonverbal cues and being able to see the people, particularly people you don't know, how you can connect with them and understand who they are. In our second book, we basically said, that you need to have the camera and it needs to be on most of the time, but there are certain circumstances where you don't need to have the camera on, and the need to some degree decompress from the video on virtual environment to some degree. So for example, I know Karin really, really well. And because of that, I know what she looks like. I know what she sounds like in terms of our conversation. So I can call her up on the phone, and when she says something sarcastically, I understand that. I know what she's saying. But if I had never met Karin, and this was the first conversation I've ever had with her, and I call her up, she may say something sarcastic, and I may not notice the connotations or the sound that would indicate that. And because of that, I may draw conclusions from the conversation that are wildly different than what she intended. And so the whole idea here is we need to use it judiciously and appropriately, particularly when meeting new people, but also to be able to communicate effectively, but also recognize that we don't need to use video all the time for every single communication that we may have with someone.
So I think that's one of the factors. And the other factor too is like how much emotional heft is there to the content that's being discussed. So if you are simply trying to find out what your dinner plans are for that night, the time and the place, that does not require video to be on in a virtual meeting. That is, pretty low stakes conversation there. But if you're talking about something that is, emotionally charged and you need all of those nonverbals to accompany the verbal, you want to have your camera on so that you can all communicate in full. Because if you don't have your camera on as a speaker, it's difficult to read the intent of your message. And if your audience doesn't have their cameras on, it's difficult for you to read the impact of your message. So, it's kind of a recalibration, I would say, Rajiv, of camera use because we didn't anticipate the meetingization of our lives where, a lot of us are in meetings, back to back to back for the entire day. And, so a lot of people blamed it on video call fatigue. I postulated that it was operator error more than anything else. We just have too many meetings. And it wasn't platform's fault that was happening. So, it's just kind of recalibrating how we were thinking about video in virtual meetings whenever it comes to hybrid. But I would say if you are in a hybrid meeting and you're showing up remotely, if you don't have your camera on, you do run the risk of disappearing.
Yep.
So, and how does that apply in the virtual setting, right? So one of the things, and, I've talked to quite a bit of people over the last several months, and, we lived in a world where the commute was either something that you were accustomed to. You got up, you commuted, you went into the office, and after that you were busy, either doing work or meetings or, working with your team or whatever you did. Suddenly you're at home, you can't go to the office any longer. So that's where the dependency on, the virtual mediums in order to connect and get work done. On the one side, there's this big debate about how everyone was so much more productive working from home than being in the office. And there's also this other debate about, hey, I find more time with my family, more quality time, work-life balance, all of that stuff. At the same time, there's also this thing about, hey, I get to multitask now. So my attention is drawn into multiple directions because I'm thinking and I'm working, and I can be on this meeting. I can have my camera off and I can be listening to a meeting while I'm typing something else or doing something else. So there's that risk of, when you're multitasking, your attention is getting drawn in so many different directions. And we are back into the paradigm now where companies are trying to basically incentivize people to come back into the offices. So, it's come a full circle, so to speak. And and on the negative side, there's the aspect of why, since people are home, they don't have to be in person in the offices. there are several that have desk jobs that could easily manage not one but 2 gigs at a time. And there are people that are doing that. And now the question is, hey, since I got to go back into office, now I got to have one job and I got to focus on it, kind of a thing. This has kind of been my observation over the last, year to several months. Is this in line with what you're seeing or what your experience has been?
There are about 5 different topics that were addressed there.
I know.
Joe, why don't you go with, talking just about, the complications of, work-life balance. I feel like that is in your wheelhouse.
Yeah. I mean, the issue that we have here is that many people have decided they like working from home. Right. Because it's created for some people a level of balance that they didn't have before in their home. Right. They were able to work for a few hours, go pick up the kid from school who threw up or whatever, come back home, work for a couple more hours, take the dog for a walk. So there's some flexibility, right, which we've known for many, many, many years people like. Right? People like that in the job. Jobs that have more flexibility, more autonomy, more control are more satisfying. That's just the truth. And to be able to do that from home is even more nice, right? Well, that's great for some people, but not for everybody. And so we're seeing that some people are like, no, I really want to be back in the office because when I'm home, I don't want to work. I want to play. Right. Maybe they're a gamer and so they want to play their video games. Maybe they're an exercise person. So they want to be on their Peloton all day, whatever it may be. There are a lot more distractions at home. For me, it was the refrigerator, as you might be able to tell from looking at me. Right. And so the reality is there are things that that are there that are distracting. Right. Then you add another layer of things on it. You mentioned the commute earlier on. Right. My commute went from being a half an hour to being 7 steps. Right. Woohoo, I gained a half an hour of time. What did we do at that time? We had more meetings and we worked longer. Right. Well, that's a problem because that's not good for humanity. Okay. We already work enough. And for a lot of people, that commute time, as problematic as it might be if you're driving a car in the environment, we can get into that as another whole nother topic. That was time alone, away from maybe the kids' chaos, the cat's chaos, alone and away from things. Hopefully you have kind drivers around you so you're not dealing with that. But books, listen to your favorite book that you're listening to or whatever, a podcast, other things. People were doing that in the car, and that was a way to transition to work and a way to transition to home. And we lost that and filled it with more work time. So the whole point of bringing all this up is people want balance, but what balance is for one person is not balance for others. And so as a psychologist, my argument, both in favor and against what you're saying, Rajiv, is that it's not a one-size-fits-all world anymore. Right. That we've let the genie out of the bottle, and some people are going to want to and need to work from home, and some people are going to want to and need to work in an office. And organizations that are able to be flexible and allow for both and lean into the hybrid working model and working environment and meeting will be really successful. Those who don't will continue to have this friction and this challenge of how do we make sure that we're working hard and doing well, even when we have people who are here or not here. It's going to be a more difficult, path to walk.
And what we're seeing, too, is a lot of self-selection. There are some organizations that have decided we are going to be fully in the office. There are some that have decided we are going to be fully remote, and the majority are in the middle in that hybrid space. But, those who are fully in the office, they'll find people who will want to work in that environment because there are people who do want that. Other end of the spectrum as well. But what has to happen is if you are amongst the majority who are saying, yes, we're going to allow for hybrid work, flexible work arrangements, that has to be something that is not just lip service. You actually need to have everything that is required to support it. So that means a change in processes. It means a change in technology that allows for that to happen, and really kind of a strategy around how do we make sure that we're not creating a 2-tier system where those who are in the office somehow have an advantage in terms of access to information and opportunity versus those who are remote.
That's very interesting. One aspect that you touched upon, Joseph, there was the transition to work and transition to office. That's so true, right? You really clicked when you stepped out of your home into the car to get to wherever you wanted to go or whatever transportation mode you had, and then you clicked once you shut off and then got out of the office, right?
Yep.
So how do you see that happening in a virtual setting with people? You're moving from your bedroom to your study and then back. Is there a ritual to be followed there?
Yeah. So one of the things that was suggested in some of the news and popular press was the idea of simulating your commute, right? By saying, okay, what did you do before to get into the mode of working? Because people were struggling to get in the mode of working. They'd commute, but then they get the TV on and they'd be like, oh, it's Today's Show, and or whatever, and they'd just get absorbed into whatever's going on there, and then they lose an hour of their work time. So the people were having a difficult time transitioning. So psychologists and others were saying, hey, people take cues. You have these natural cues that you've built up around transitioning to work or transitioning to home. And so the suggestion was you need to simulate some of that to some degree. And by doing that, it helps to transition your mind from home person to working person, right? And that works for some people. It doesn't work for everyone, but that's one way that was suggested as a way to do that, right? And so if you had a half an hour commute, well, in the morning, maybe you figure out a way to, okay, I'm going to get up, I'm going to eat my breakfast, and then I'm going to, sit and listen to the book that I've been working on, listening to while I'm driving. Just sit in a comfortable seat, probably more comfortable than your car seat, but that's okay, and listen to it. And then when you've gotten to, set a timer, when you get to that half an hour or whatever your commute was, turn it off, get up like you're getting out of your car and walk to your, where the location in your home where you're going to be working, right? And so I think that's one way to simulate it, right? And it, like I said, it can work for some people. It doesn't work for everyone.
One of the things that we have seen, right, during the pre-pandemic, 2019 times,
yeah,
whether you stepped into the office into a meeting or whether you were on camera like this, you were always formally dressed, right? You were formally dressed. Sure. You wanted to look good. You were in an environment, an atmosphere where there were no noises, and you were truly embarrassed if your dog barked or if your child yapped or something like that.
Yeah.
We've become more accommodating now. We are in meetings where there might be some people that are in their pajamas. There might be a cat in their lap or a dog or kids playing in the background. The TV running. How, that's a transition, and we've accepted it. We've become more empathetic to it because of the situation that we were all in. With the changes post-pandemic, how do you see that evolving? Will we still continue to be that empathetic to it? Will we be so tolerant, or will we go back to our old ways?
I think it's moving away from being embarrassed about those cat cameos and kid cameos and figuring out how to address it as efficiently as possible. So that means oftentimes, saying, excuse me just a minute, muting your audio, turning off your video, addressing whatever needs to be addressed, and then coming back and getting back down to business as quickly as possible after a short apology. I think one of the things that has happened, as you mentioned, Rajiv, is that there's been this level of empathy that has developed over the past several years for people's personal challenges and their situations, and that is a good thing. I think that we're seeing our employees, we're seeing our teammates, we're seeing our customers as whole people, rather than just their roles, and so that's created a different sort of dynamic in the workplace. But I think there also has to be an understanding that even though you might be in a more relaxed environment, that does not mean that you can fully relax your level of professionalism. So what I always suggest is, make sure you're matching audience expectations. If you're meeting with a key opinion leader and you're showing up in your pajamas because, you're still at home, that's not going to fly. You need to think about how you would be showing up for a meeting with them in person. Now, if you are meeting with your team and that is the culture that allows you to show up in your pajamas and they're fine with that, then good. But you always have to be thinking about how you want to portray yourself to the people you're meeting with on the other side.
Makes sense. So Let's talk about your books, Suddenly Virtual and Suddenly Hybrid. Can you kind of give us an overview of what can readers expect?
Yeah, I'm happy to kick this off, and Karin can chime in because she knows them just as well or better than I do. So Suddenly Virtual, as you know, happened shortly after the pandemic. Really kind of sunk in that we were going to be in this for a while. We wrote it in October of 2020, and it came out in March of 20. Was it March?
I don't remember.
I don't
Honestly,
remember.
I don't remember.
Sometime in 2021, sometime 1,000 years ago, when we
We've
were all
written
still
a lot of books in a short period of time.
Right. And this was really focused on this notion that we have to make this work. This virtual environment, we had to make it work. And so what people can expect is to see some data, which is what I'm really excited about talking about, is the fact that in October of 2019, for whatever reason, I thought, you know what, I'm doing a lot of these virtual meetings. Maybe I should start studying these, because I've been studying, for the most part, face-to-face meetings, which is great. But now I was kind of curious about this. So I did this October 2019, collected data. Then in May of 2020, I was like, well, you know what? Now we're all experiencing this. Let's collect data again from those same people. And that's what Suddenly Virtual does. It says, okay, here's what life was like pre-pandemic. Here's what life is now that we're all kind of living in this virtual environment, right? And talks about, what does that mean? What does it look like? How did we get from 80% of our meetings being face-to-face to now only 10% of them being face-to-face, and being 70% in a virtual environment? And then we talk about tips and tricks and ways to be present on camera. And this is Karin's major contribution, is really how do we engage with the camera and with the people in the room when we're in a virtual environment. And then as the time passed, and we all kind of had this moment where we thought, oh, are we coming to the end of it? It was like June of 2021. And it was before Delta, it was before Omicron. And so we were kind of like, oh, it's summer and it's going to get back to normal. And so we collected data right at that moment, right? Granted, we know the pandemic didn't end then, but there was lots of organizations who were starting this transition to a hybrid environment. So we asked people, how are you doing with that? And that's what Suddenly Hybrid is about. It's about, okay, what's that experience like? And how are people doing it? And what can be done to make it really, really effective? So it's really like, if you're doing virtual meetings, Suddenly Virtual is going to really tell you how to do it and help you augment the skills you've already developed. And Suddenly Hybrid is for those who are starting this transition to the hybrid environment, saying, okay, here's how you make the hybrid meeting work and make it work really well for you and for your team. And it's a fascinating complementary series. In fact, we've noticed that people who have started reading Suddenly Hybrid have found Suddenly Virtual and been like, hey, I should get this one as well because this one's really helping me. So that's been kind of fascinating to see that.
Yeah, and both books, I would say, Rajiv, are very action-oriented and practical. There is, of course, theory. My co-author being a meeting scientist, there, of course, is theory. But there's a lot of just specific things that you can do, like lots of checklists, lots of reflection activities, lots of ways that you can actually use it as a workbook to be able to chart out your strategy, especially for hybrid, because hybrid can be challenging. You're dealing with a very complex communication environment. You have people who are in the same room. You have people who are calling in. You have people who are showing up on video. How do you get everybody to, communicate effectively amongst each other? That requires a lot of work and a lot of intention. So that's why we want the book to be something that people can use, not just to, think about, oh, this sounds like a good concept, but rather to say, okay, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z because Karin and Joe told us why X, Y, and Z work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And where can people find these books?
Anywhere you buy books. I mean, truly, you can. So, and anything online, you're certainly going to find Suddenly Virtual and Suddenly Hybrid. And Joe's found it in his local Barnes and Noble.
I have. So Amazon's a great site. There's lots of other sites, other places where people order their books from. That's probably your best bet. Bookstores are starting to carry these books as well. I was excited to see it in the wild, as it were, and myself recently. And so just go find it, go enjoy it. I think it's we hope that you will enjoy it as much as we did just writing it. So,
are you guys working on a third in the series with how things are changing now?
Someday, Joe will actually launch a book and not be writing another one at the same time. I don't know when that's going to happen, but the answer is yes, Rajiv. So we're excited about this. It's part of the Dummies series. So, Zoom for Dummies, Slack for Dummies. We're running effective meetings for dummies.
Awesome.
Yep.
And what's for people that want to get in touch with you, what's the best way to contact you?
So for me, just check out my website, www.joeallen.org. There's my contact information is there. There's a contact to Joe button, and my books are listed there. It has all sorts of information about all the science of meetings. So if you're interested in some of the egghead research that I do, it's available there. And so happy to have people go there and then reach out. I would love to answer people's questions, connect in a meaningful way with anyone who would like to.
Fantastic. And if you want to contact me, the best place to go is through our company website, which is speakerdynamics.com. We do a lot of training ranging from one-on-one to some online training through Speaker Dynamics University that allows it to scale so people can learn how to navigate this new way of meeting and getting business done through a webcam.
That's pretty awesome. Well, thank you both so much for joining us today. Thank you for sharing, your stories as well as the work that you have done. Absolutely needed in current times, and a lot of confusion out there in terms of the work environments that we currently have. I'm sure the listeners are going to reach out, and wish you the very best in your future endeavors.
Thank you, Rajiv.
Thank you.